Hey, Eileen, how are you? I haven't seen you in the longest time.
Gosh, I'm great. It's really been a while.
How's your family? How are the boys doing?
My kids are great. Scott is a sophomore in college now, and Brian, in Seattle.
Unbelievable. What about Brian? Where's he going to school?
Brian's at Woodside Priory. He's a junior.
Really? Where is that in Woodside?
Well, it's not in Woodside. It's in Portola Valley. But it's a beautiful 60-acre campus.
You know, I've heard really good things about that school. Is it religious like some of the other Catholic schools? I mean, like, is it one of those Jesuit schools? What's Benedictine?
Well, Benedictine is, I don't know. Let's ask our panel of experts today.
Today we have Father Martin, Tim Wolak, Scott Parker, and Reed Easley. And all of them represent a little bit different aspect of the Priory campus.
Okay.
And by the way, we're recording the meeting so that people who are not able to be here, we will again try to post it online so that people can watch it in its entirety. So when Eileen and I try to put together meetings, we sit down in the summertime, we try to plan out the entire year. And we always try to have outside speakers at this meeting, but we thought we had a unique opportunity based on an email that Brian Schlack sent out earlier this summer to delve into something that's more internal to the Priory as opposed to going external. So we put together a little program of questions that we'd like to ask these guys and get their perspective. And then if time permits, we will try to have a few questions at the end. But if not, all of them have told us that they're willing to talk to you one-on-one, or you can email them your question, and they'd be happy to talk to you about it if we don't cover that topic. Sorry, I need your glasses. So the first question I'm going to address to Father Martin. And while I think a lot of people here in the audience know a lot about the history of the school, and they know about Father Egon's efforts to establish it back in the 50s, a lot of people would like to know more about the current monastic presence on campus. So first of all, I'd like if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you became a monk, the vows that you took when you became a monk.
I think the reason why I became a monk is because I always wanted to be a model, and I found out you could do it here. And go to Patrick James and get a $125 tie and wear it in front of a lot of people. Living by myself. I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and I just grew up in kind of fairly normal circumstances. My dad was a butcher, mom didn't work, and throughout the course of my education, I went to a Catholic grammar school, and then I went to St. Benedict's Prep School, which was a school run by Benedictines in inner city Newark. So in one way, it was a lot like the Priory, the kind of atmosphere, the kind of monks that were teaching us. Most were monks at that time. They were doing the teaching. And you really get touched and influenced by the people who you run into throughout your lives and you kind of relate to throughout your life. So that had a pretty strong influence on my life. The school was different from the Priory in a sense. It was an inner city school, all pretty much blue-collar kids, and a lot of bars and pool halls around the place and things like that. But the kind of sense inside of community was very much like the Priory. So if you liked one, the circumstances might be a little bit different, but the other, you'd like the other. And so when I graduated from high school, I went to St. Anselm College in New Hampshire. And once again, it was run by Benedictine monks, and most of the teachers there were monks. So you got to know a lot of them. They impressed me a lot in many, many ways. The kind of way they dealt with the students, we were students, the way in which they kind of respected people, the sense of community they really worked hard to develop. And it was just one of those really fine experiences as far as I was concerned. When I got to be junior, and mostly when I got to be a senior, I was like many other people at that time, not quite sure what you wanted to do. Military was one possibility. I had been in the Army Reserves for 3 years, and I also did a lot of work, part-time work, working my way through college, so I thought about maybe getting into the workforce. There's a lot of things that were on the plate, but I started thinking seriously in my senior year about the possibility of joining a monastery. And I kind of pursued that, and was very, very unsure when I made the decision after graduating to join the monastery. There's a lot of stuff on my plate at that time, and it was one of those things where I was saying, maybe this, maybe that, but this is something I think I have to try. And so I'm still trying. Without too much success, but nevertheless. So I joined the monastery then at St. Anselm, and after the first year, the visit year, which is kind of tough, I started going to graduate school. But I didn't tell my mother. Oh, I didn't tell my parents until I had made my decision and kind of got it straightened out there, and I went back, and I think I surprised them quite a bit. I know I shocked a lot of the guys in my class at the time when I made that decision. But anyway, and I really liked what I was doing, and I liked working with college students. So I was teaching in college, and I was there teaching until 1975. What happened in 75 was a very interesting thing. This short monk came to Woodstock, came to St. Anselm Monastery and said, you know, we need some help, and like we're in this place in California, and I'm saying, California, that's like west of here, isn't it, somewhere? Never been to California, and that was Father Pius, and Father Pius was saying, you know, our monks here are getting a little bit older, we're looking for some young guys who are, it's young then, who are American. The school when I first came here in 1975 had a very kind of heavily European sense to it. The atmosphere is very European. The monks here are mostly Hungarians, with one from India, and a lot of the parents who also had deep European backgrounds, and so they wanted to kind of get to bring it around, have a little bit more American influence. So 4 of us came out at that particular time. Bing Crosby, the very famous singer, came here to dedicate the gymnasium for one thing, but he also came here in order to look at the school as far as his kids were concerned. And his wife said, "Too European, send them down to Bellarmine." Losers, but anyway. So I came here, so I must tell you this, the very first year I was here, teaching in high school and teaching in college are like total different things. They're like worlds and worlds apart. The first year was, it was just so, everything was new. I didn't know anybody. It was really kind of hard to kind of make that adaptation. And I remember clearly the brother of Trixie Putnam was a little rascal. And I remember him distinctly as being one of those guys who knew how to tweak it just far enough to not be bad, but to really pull your chain. And so I've been here ever since, and now I look back and I say that there's nothing really better. I just love the kids here. They're really great, and it's really fun working with them. They know what they're here for, thanks to the parents in many cases. And the idea of community that we have here just has been something that I've really thrived in, and I just love it. And I always tell the kids I'm here on temporary loan, but they forgot. So I'm going to answer your question. A long way.
Can you tell us a little bit about the monastic life here on campus, of kind of the group of monks that are here?
Well, yeah. Of course, there's now 4 of us. There was a time we had about 15 or 16 at one point in time that I've been here, but throughout the years it kind of diminished now. So there's 4 of us here now, as you know, and the interesting part about it is we're all very different. And maybe that's why things work so well, I don't know. But You know Father Pius. Now, Father Pius has been retired for 6, 7 years now, but Father Pius is a very interesting guy. He's a wonderful linguist. He thrives on words, on language. He reads voraciously, and he also became very skilled at the computer, which surprised me because he's the oldest one. He's in 81 or so. And anyway, but he's a great linguist. He, as I said, he reads a lot, and he's very, very bright. He has a wonderful sense of humor, and the kids in the middle school think he's like the greatest thing since, I don't know, whatever, sliced bread. Father Morris was one of the best teachers, and he ran the science building for years. He was head of the department for years, and he's really a very, very fine teacher. I was talking to him the other day, and he was looking at, since he retired this year from teaching, he was looking at the kids who took the AP exams last year. They almost all got 5s. It was really amazing. He does a wonderful job teaching. He's also a really fine cook. He loves to cook, and he likes to take charge of things and do a good job. He now works a lot with the Hungarian community. So, as you may know, we have Hungarian Mass here every Sunday at 11 o'clock. We have people from San Francisco and all over the Hungarian community. It's in Hungarian, and he's sort of their pastor. So he spends a lot of time now going to hospitals and visiting people, doing funerals and weddings and all of those various things. So that's kind of what he does. Brother Edward's totally different. Brother Edward's one of these guys who can juggle numbers and with great precision and love to do it. So he's our guru on this WASP committee, which I would never want to do anything with that. He assembles all this wonderful information. He puts it all together, makes it very, very digestible, and puts it out there. Someone says, how did he ever do that? He's very good at that, he just is one of these guys who has this great quality about him that can take care of things like that. He's also very much loved by the kids. And I'm a little bit different, just plain old different. I'm sort of a craftsman, I guess, and stuff like that. I just like to do stuff with my hands. That's kind of what I do and ride a bike every now and then. So we're all quite different, but I think that the good part about it is that that makes everything work very well. We work extremely well together. There's not one who would help anybody else out in the community where there's any need. So it kind of works very well. Our daily schedule is kind of interesting. You get about 4:45 in the morning. 6 o'clock we all meet for prayer, and that's about a half an hour or so. We read Old Testament Psalms as part of our prayer life, and then you will have breakfast after that, and then we have Mass every morning at 7:15, and that is about half an hour or so. Then we're out for our work day, and then we meet in the evening for our Vesper service. That's about 15 or 20 minutes, and then we also after dinner we have a very short kind of evening prayer. So we meet for prayer every day. And we're always all there, unless somebody's away somewhere. But it's a nice thing. It's kind of interesting thing because in New Hampshire at St. Anselm Monastery, where I used to live, before every meeting that we have, that is say prayer service, there's this big awful fire bell that rings throughout the whole monastery. You know, it's like very jarring, and that summons everybody to prayer. Okay. We've never had that at the Priory. Back at St. Anselm's, they all drag in late. At the Priory, everyone's there and on time, and no one ever misses. So that's really kind of nice thing about it. So that's what our day is kind of like. Then the rest of the day, of course, is usually being involved with different aspects of the school, for most of us anyway.
Thank you. We're going to switch gears now a little bit here.
Right. Our next question, we're going to start by asking Tim. So Brian Schmack sent out an email earlier this summer saying, this year we are delving into Benedictine identity, and this is a WASP recommendation for us, and the timing seems appropriate for this type of exploration. Can you talk about what WASP means to the school? Can you talk about that recommendation, the importance, what's being planned this year, things like that?
So if you know, WASC is an accrediting agency which stands for the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. Almost everybody in the area belongs to that and to the CAIS, which is the California Association of Independent Schools. We also belong to the WCEA, which is the Western Catholic Education Association. So this WASC is every 6 years they come in and accredit us. The interesting thing about it is that the committee reads our own self-study and then really kind of regurgitates our own recommendations. They do not come in and say, well, you should not have people parking outside there. They might say there could be a potential safety issue there. They can't come in and say you should be teaching 3 more APs. They can't come in and say, you know what, your administrator in this particular area is not doing a very good job. They do none of that. So they are actually members just like I am. I will go out as a WASC chair or a WASC committee member, so teachers and administrators come in. The idea is for them to take a look at our own self-study. Each of them probably reads a section of it. And then they come in and kind of visually and in other ways talk to people and find out if what we're saying in that self-study is true. As a whole committee, they're going to look at what are some of our action plans and recommendations are. After the last one, which was 6 years ago, we said ourselves, we need to continually look at the monastic presence and being a Benedictine school and maintaining that Benedictine identity. We said that to ourselves because we really feel that's probably the highest priority. And the fact that in a short period of time, we have 4 monks right now. At the last WASC, we had 5. Father Agon was still alive, so now we have 4. Next WASC in 6 years, maybe there's 3 or 2, and are they still here? That would be the question. So what it means is we actually started looking at this in earnest in 1996 when St. Anselm, who had been sending monks out to us every once in a while, maybe 1 here or 2 there, and in 92 they sent out 4 monks, and as early as, well, as far back, in 92 we had 12 monks on campus. But within a very short time, there weren't 12 anymore. It just kind of kept going down to eventually to 5. But St. Anselm sent monks out. By 96, they don't have enough vocations in their religious at the Abbey to keep their college going. So they told us in 96, you'll get no more monks. So we've been operating on that concept for quite a while. So our initial thing was we're going to go to everything we can that's Benedictine. So we have hosted international youth congresses, we've hosted national education conferences for Benedictines. We try to attend all of them, but as both monks and lay people, we try to send people there so they get an idea of what the Benedictine world is all about. And the only reason we're a Benedictine school is because we were founded by the Benedictines. If the Franciscans had founded us, we'd be a Franciscan school. If we were founded by the Jesuits, the Christian Brothers or Brothers of the Holy Cross. If you're not Catholic, in the Catholic Church, there's a million religious orders who start all kinds of things, whether it's churches or schools. And during the 50s, you know, they were like little entrepreneurs. There were a lot of vocations. There were a lot of priests, brothers, and sisters who were all coming out of the novitiate and the scholasticate, and they had, you know, they were starting schools because they had to put these religious somewhere. And so they started lots of schools. And so for us to start as a Benedictine school, we were one of many in the 50s and early 60s that got started here in the Diocese of San Francisco. So WASC, as we're doing it this year, is we're looking back on our recommendations from 6 years ago and also trying to look forward another 6 years. So it's kind of a 12-year picture of who we are. We kind of relished this past year because it gave us a chance to look at really all the things we have done. You know, not only in this area, but some of the other recommendations, which is certainly curriculum review, facilities, finances. There's about 10 different categories that the WASC report looks at. And the key to it is all the work that we do as faculty, parents, trustees to kind of answer all these questions. So we try to do a rich amount of study and research to see where we are and where we'd like to go in the future. So the concept of, I think maybe the next question is what happens when there's no more monks? You know, if you know any of the local Catholic schools, whether it's St. Francis or Midi, or there are very few religious anymore. And there are many Catholic high schools and grade schools that have no religious there at all. I think we're fortunate as we were a school founded by a religious order. So what usually comes with that is some sort of charism, some sort of guidelines. They have a certain way of living that is translated into the school itself. I went to a Christian Brothers high school, so I was taught by the Christian Brothers, and they had a whole philosophy just like the Benedictines do. So what we attempt to do and have done is to take that whole rich history of 1,500 years and see how it fits into the Priory, or how we maintain it, first of all. And one of the ways we were doing that was to go out and to talk to other Benedictine schools. I think for Benedictines, we are one of the first schools that kind of looks like they're going to lose their monks, and the lay people are taking a much stronger and greater role in running the school and trying to maintain the school. Many of the Benedictine abbeys, probably what's unique about them is if you join a Benedictine abbey, you stay in that abbey your whole life. They take a vow of stability. If you were a Christian brother, a Jesuit, they might transfer you from school to school. You know, St. Francis, or University of San Francisco's president could end up at the University of Santa Clara, because they're both Jesuit schools. They're part of a province. The Benedictines are very independent. They have not networked a lot until about the last 15 to 20 years, as their monastic numbers have kind of started to dwindle, and that's when they kind of started these national and international meetings. Those that are in the Benedictine world look at us and really like what they see, the way we've been able to kind of shepherd that all along, how we are very much asking our lay faculty to embrace that. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about this place, is our faculty and our kids and everybody has kind of embraced the philosophy built around those 5 values. Not necessarily Benedictine values, but values that we see in this school that kind of grew out of everything that we had been doing with the students or as faculty, building community, you know, looking at the individual, caring for that. Benedictine hospitality is huge. You know, if you're ever anywhere in the world, you can go to a Benedictine monastery, abbey. They have guest rooms. You know, they have to feed you. All these great things. You know, you can travel the world on a dime by just going from abbey to abbey. So it's all of those things that have really, you know, made it, I think, a rich culture here for us. And I think in the things we've tried to do, certainly try to reflect all that, both on our mission statement, those values that we have, and the living presence that we have. I think for most religious schools, the hardest thing is when there are no more religious in the school. So for our kids and for us to no longer see somebody like Father Martin around in a black robe, our men in black, that will be the hardest thing forever. Or to know that we would be walking by the chapel at 7:15, 7:30 in the morning and nothing's going on in there because there is nobody. Or the first time we have a student mass and Father Martin is not saying mass. We have to bring a priest in from the outside to say mass, which is what the other schools are doing right now. So you lose that sense of he and the other monks being such a big part of this community, that would be the biggest thing that we would have to deal with as a community, is not seeing the monks around. So, we could probably put some of us in black robes. And it's not. It was really interesting. About 20 years ago, Rosie Hewlett was on the board because she lived up in Portola Valley and came to church here on every Sunday. And she wanted to know from the abbot, well, how much is it going to cost to get a new monk? Is it 50,000? Is it 100? What do you need? And so you can't buy it. That's the hard part. And even way back in '96, as one of our recommendations in this area was, we have told every abbey in the country, you can come, if they can come and stay for a week, 2 weeks, a semester, they can go, if they're studying at Stanford or Berkeley, come and stay at the Priory. You'll stay for free, do whatever you want. And we've had very little response to it. Every once in a while someone will come, but I think if the majority of the Benedictine abbeys are in the Midwest and the East, they don't necessarily come this direction. They may also be really worried that if they do come out here, they'll never leave. Because we do treat people really well out here. So all of those things have been thought about and attempted, and the word is out there.
Okay, so it sounds like it's going to be really up to a lot to the teachers and the administrators to perpetuate this and continue it on.
Yes.
So I'd like to ask Scott and Reed, as an administrator and a teacher, kind of how do you view your role in maintaining this Benedictine tradition?
Sure. So I had the privilege about 3 years ago to travel to Santiago, Chile for the Benedictine Educators Network. And that was one of the experiences in my life that I will treasure forever. I got to know so many religious people and lay faculty from all over the world. And I've continued my correspondences with a number of these people. So just being part of this network of these fiercely individual order, and just that's going to be a really important part for me to keep that connection. But coming back and sort of talking about that experience with other teachers, sort of just talking about how important it is to be Benedictine. That was my huge takeaway when I went to this conference. But the other thing that sort of just on a personal level that I try to do is really talk about being Benedictine in my classroom and with my students. It's Father Martin and I work together in the art department, and which I think looks pretty great. Never fight. We never do. But I've been here, this is my 14th year here, and for probably 11 of those years, when we're just doing hands-on work in the classroom, we have the radio going a lot, or the kids put on music, playlists, and things like that, and it's not always appropriate. And it was so easy for me for so many years to say, what if Father Martin were to walk in? What do you think of that? What if Father Morris came through? And that was so easy. And after going to this conference, I came back and I said that it's not up to Father Martin and Father Morris and Father Pius to come in and to have to say this is not Benedictine. We don't do that here. That's something that I do now on my own. I say, this isn't part of who we are. This is not welcoming for a community. This isn't Benedictine. I probably drop the B-bomb Benedictine like 10 times a day. Whenever I have a sub, and I'm tell the kids, okay, we're having a sub tomorrow. You need to show your best Benedictine hospitality when we have this substitute here. And just sort of really trying to bring that home to the kids that it's not just the monks that are responsible for this. Keeping up these values that we hold so true.
So I think of it in a couple of ways. One is similar to that, the way that we talk to students. But the other is actually that a number of us, quite a few of us, live on campus. And that experience has a lot to do with, I think, kind of what the Benedictine charism means to me. There's 10 little boys from the age of 10 down living on campus, and we're ready to hand them over at any moment. If you need little Benedictines. But there's something that's different about the Priory because of that. You can go to a Jesuit school and you can go to a lot of the other schools that don't have an intentional community living on campus, being a part of the school, and intentional is really kind of the word for it. A lot of us we've just made a decision that this is the way that we want to also live. When I came out to Priory, it was 12 years ago, from Boston, I came from a Jesuit school, and really wanted to have the benefits of living in a monastic school without being a monastic. It's like a monk with benefits. So we kind of have that here, where we get a chance to know the monks. One of the things that I think has been really amazing has been our relationship with the monastic community has grown so much because we brought children onto the campus, and to see kind of actually the change in our own monks by having so many children on the campus. They're wonderful with the kids, and the kids really love them, and they know them, they know who they are. They really clean up their language and their act the minute they're around. And so part of it is also kind of the benefit of we get to experience an intentional community, and that's something that I'm actually really positive about. It's hard, I think it's got to be difficult for Father Martin and the monastic community because we talk so often about their mortality, and they sit here so nicely, and it's a really hard thought for us because we're not necessarily positive what it means. What I can say though is that in the last 10 years, I've felt the Benedictine character of the school only grow stronger, and even with a monk less or the possibility of fewer monks, it's become that much more real. Chapels are crystal clear for kids. They don't dodge them. They get the most out of it when they graduate from the Priory. They all talk about what they learned sitting in weekly chapels. They're not painful. They're wonderful. They get to hear from people from all walks of life, and they get to hear their stories. So one of the things that I think we're doing with kids is And this comes straight out of, I think, the Benedictine world is that there is something unique about the Benedictines in that they truly walk the walk when they're talking about listening to all people, and especially to kids. So there's a certain kind of experimental nature to this school that you don't always find in a lot of other schools, a lot of other religious schools that kind of are a bit staid and have ways of doing things. The Benedictines, and especially this monastic group, are so open to new approaches, new ideas. They're very progressive in their worldview in a lot of ways, and they listen to kids. And so I think what you get here is a slightly more open-minded approach to being with kids and giving them the opportunity to come up with solutions. And it was the other piece that actually kind of drew me to the Priory was when I came to interview, the fact that I was even getting a chance to meet Father Martin or Brother Edward or monastic was huge, because I was coming from a school that you waited for years to meet the president of the school. And you didn't walk into the headmaster's office and talk to them. There's a real humility here that I think pervades the school, and it's in a lot of ways I think it's a Benedictine humility. But we try to bring that to the students. I think the students are picking up so much more than we actually are aware of, kind of on a day-to-day basis. For me, still, I think probably the unique part about doing it here, teaching here, being a part of this school, is that the school's very overt about actually choosing to love the kids, and puts it even in the mission statement. And for some, that's kind of a jarring thought. But it's a great place to start in a school. If you start with the idea that we love them, and even when they're driving you crazy and everything, it's a bit of a paternal thing. You can't help it. You love them. You said you were going to love them. That's where you start. And from there, you have more opportunities. You have more options, open to you when you teach kids. So I think that's been for me. I hope that that's the part that kids get, is that they feel known and that they're loved.
I want to ask Father Martin and Tim if they wanted to chime in on the role.
Well, yeah, this is going to be, he mentioned about the kids on campus, which is really great. It's also great for our students. They see these little kids growing up, and the girls are just, when the girls find out someone is pregnant, they're like, oh my God, they're all over the place. And the same thing with the guys, it's really wonderful. So Augie, this is Brian Schlack's little boy. A year or so ago, Father Pius was walking slowly over around where the kids all hang out, and Augie, and he's standing there, and Augie is on his little bike, and he says, to Father Pius says, "Get out of the way." So Brian says, "You can't talk to him like that. You must be respectful." He says, "Get out of the way, please." We all have stories about the kids on campus, and it's wonderful to see them kind of grow up, But that was just a great story. And boring. He'd love to tell that story.
My only thing is, I was listening to everybody talk too.
Go ahead.
Are you finished?
Oh, yeah.
Is that concept of humility, which is part of the rule of St. Benedict, which the Benedictines, as religious, read and learn in their formation and everything, and how the Benedictines have always been known as people that don't toot their horns. So you may sometimes not even know that there's a Benedictine school or an abbey in the area, because they live where they work. And I think in the early days of the Priory, when you had the 15 monks here, or 16 or 17, they weren't out in the community. So there was probably a little bit of mystery about this place off the road. They didn't go to town meetings. They certainly had things that they had to do and to raise money, but as maybe that shifted a little bit too, from fewer religious to more lay people in positions of administration or living in the community, that has changed quite a bit. People know a whole lot more about the Priory than they've ever known about in the last 50 years or so. So I think that part of that humility is something that the kids see in the monastics that are here. Maybe some of that is rubbed off on us a little bit too, and how important that is as a foundation to growing up and figuring out who you are in great ways. I think it creates a depth in individuals that is just really positive.
Tom Carter, who was a former drama director, he was charismatic, the kids loved him, and he's very much responsible for the PAC in this building here, because they had a lot of input in that. after he retired and moved on. But I remember clearly, and this is quite a few years ago, we were, the faculty have a retreat every year where we all get together and we have a good quality speaker, and we have time to do a little meditation, a little time to think and talk to each other about things that are not academic. And it was Tom's second year here, I think, and he said, and he was hired because he was an extremely good drama teacher. He said, I says, now I understand why I'm here. It makes all the difference in the world. So the first year he was a great drama director. The second year he really began to understand what the school was about, what the monastic tradition was about, and to him that was very, very important. I remember him saying that just as it were last week, very distinctly. He said, now I really get it, now I understand. It's incredible guy.
We're going to switch gears here a little bit. The one thing that unites all of us in this room is that we have children who go to school here. So we'd like to start talking directly about our kids and the influence of Benedictine. And I'm going to start with Scott and then invite everyone else to chime in. And Scott, you said your job is dealing with the students here other than in the classroom. And we've all heard a lot of that in presentations about the rule of Benedict and the 5 values that the Priory makes part of its mission statement. But what I'd like to ask you is, why do you think it's important to teach the children about Benedictine values and tradition? Do you think it's still relevant? And lastly, we're dealing with kids who are 6th grade through 12th grade. Does it make sense to them? Do they get it, or are they too immature in developing to really understand and get it and understand?
No, they're not too immature to understand it. If anything, sometimes I think they understand it without all of the intellectual filters, and it sometimes just makes kind of perfect sense to them. One of the things I think that's kind of that's becoming challenging, and I know that you must experience this too, is that possibly one of the most important parts of the Benedictine tradition here is this idea that Benedictines try to set everything to a balanced tone. And so the school's motto, Ora et Labora, prayer and work, probably I would say because of increasingly how busy the world is, and by virtue of that, children, young people are busier now than they've ever been. I think that they feel noticeably busier to me now than they did 10 years ago. And I worry about that. And so some of I think the benefit of it, the relevance of it, is somehow trying to continually find ways to overtly try to balance their lives. And we've looked at that in terms, usually we talk about it in terms of their stress. And student stress, and what can a school do that might help kind of relieve that stress. So we moved to a schedule that gave them a morning to sleep in, unless you do music, and then you have other stresses. And a block schedule that gave them fewer homework nights per class. But I mean, going forward, I think if we don't find some kind of way to put this in their hands, and this language in their hands, for them to tell us what their carrying capacity is, and probably for the parents to speak for their kids, what is too much for them, then we're going to slowly kind of lose this. Because the beauty of the Benedictine nature of the school is that we still have these visual reminders of people who have carved out sections of their lives that they don't put a meeting over it. You don't, and it's been interesting. I've been having a beer with Father Martin at 5 o'clock. Sorry, it was, and he'll say, I gotta go to Vespers, and I'm thinking, that's crazy. We're drinking a beer. What are you doing?
5 o'clock in the morning, this is
right. But this, kind of. The point of saying that there are certain things kind of in your life that we don't want you compromising with. We want you to carve it out, and we want you to have it and have it be special. That's a challenge in a Benedictine school. I think we do it well. I think we're challenged to do it better, obviously. But that, so it feels really relevant to me, but especially in terms of the balanced conversation with kids.
And I'd like to ask the whole panel, what do you think is most important for the kids in being Benedictine? And what do you think the biggest obstacle and challenge is that they face today in doing that?
I'd just like to say something about the feature. Benedictine rule goes back 1,500 years, so it's not totally relevant in every single aspect. For example, Benedict writes, when you go to bed at night, don't keep your knife in your sack. So I never do that. I take my knife out, but the concept that he has of balance is an important one. I think that's one of the things, as Scott said, one of the things we try to have the kids get a certain amount of balance. The book we've been reading as a faculty has been Finding Sanctuary, and it's pretty much about that, putting time aside so that everything isn't rush. And here in Silicon Valley, that's the way life is. So it's always a problem and a job to try to get things kind of under control. And I admit I have a lot of problems with that myself, but it's one of those things you kind of work at. One of the things I would mention is the fact that when the kids graduate, before they graduate, after the APs, after all the exams are done, we meet them all one-on-one for an exit interview. And invariably, they will mention two things. They will mention the retreats, and they'll mention the chapel assemblies that we have. They say, and they're very often will come out like this. So talking about the kind of growth that the kids have, and it's not always the same from class to class. He says, you know, when we were sixth graders, we were so boring, stuff like that. And then let's talk about when they were sophomores, juniors, and seniors, how important the stories that were being told meant to them, the importance. And practically all the kids will mention those two things almost all the time. They'll mention all the goods and the bads about the Priory. Those are two things that always seem to come up. The other thing, too, I think, is the idea of what Benedict's whole charism was, and the reason why, when Benedict was writing, he wrote his rule, okay? At that time, there were dozens of rules around. Everyone's writing a rule, you know? His stayed. It's the oldest one going. Why did it stay? Because he had the whole sense that you treat every monk as the person who they are. In other words, you don't take people and say, okay, cookie cutter, this is what you've got to do, but rather, where is this person in his growth, and how do I treat him because of that? So we try to do that, I think, very well with the kids. The kids are all different. They're different ages, different styles, different whatevers, as you all know. If you have two kids, they could be like so different. And so the idea of treating the kids as they are and bringing them along that way is an important thing, as far as, and that's right from the rule. That's from St. Benedict.
I think what the kids gravitate towards a lot, what I see in my classroom and in chapel services, is that they gravitate towards that value of individuality, that the kids are recognized for wearing a bow tie every single Tuesday. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that kid for that, and that kid is loved because of that. All the quirks, all the celebrations for being an athlete or being a musician or an artist, all of those things are celebrated among the faculty, among the students, everybody. And I think that's something really unique to the school. I think that's something that the kids take a lot of pride in, that they're known for these things. I think that's one of the sort of most important values for them, and it's something that they mention in those senior exit interviews too. It's something they don't forget. There's no one that sort of is, you know, falling through the cracks. There's so many times that you see a kid sitting by themselves in the cafeteria, and none of us have to go say to another kid, hey, you know, why don't you invite them to your table? The kids do that on their own. They've taken that on themselves, being hospitable. I'm just so proud of the kids when I see them do things like that. I never see a kid in a classroom off by themselves without other kids coming up to them. And often they'll, you know, maybe this kid does want to sit by themselves, but it's not because they haven't been invited. So I think just the, you know, those two values, I just see the kids really live them in their daily life here at the school.
And one of my thoughts was, I think when kids come to open houses, some are just really attracted and drawn to this place, and maybe you are as families, you know. So I think we end up just in that whole process selecting kids and families that just like what's going on here. You know, it's not an urban school; it's a wonderful natural landscape environment here. There's a contemplative nature here. We do, you know, talk about the monastic community and their influence on it. So I think as kids come in, there's already a certain type of student or person that sees something of real value here anyway. And then the senior exit interviews just kind of really help us understand what they are learning about as they go through. And as Father Henry mentioned, the chapels seem to just come up over and over again about, it's just like a very passive learning place. And I think the greatest thing they can hear is, you know, their teachers, you know, the two examples we have of two teachers that were lawyers. And one driven by his father to be a lawyer, and the other who left here at one point working in the dorm and went, and it was on Manhattan in the 42nd floor and had everything, all the money he wanted. He was miserable. And the other one finally had to tell his dad, I'm not going to be a lawyer, I want to be a teacher. And for kids to hear that, you know, that there is no, you know, that everybody goes through that. You all have problems, you have challenges and obstacles and all that stuff. And in the last few weeks, you know, just the ones you had at the beginning of the school year have been great. And so there's so much, and that probably speaks to them so much more than anything they'll find in a book, because it's all about them, you know, figuring out who they are, their own, you know, self-worth, self-identity. And I remember in one of my chapel talks, I was going back over some of those and saying, you know, I'm hoping that what you heard from this person or that person, that when you get in that position, you can go back and say, well, yeah, I remember that teacher said, you know, you didn't have to do that, you know, that I could stand up for myself and try something new and not worry about it. So I just think those things are really important. And I was thinking the evolution of this school from all boys to co-ed, to expanding middle school, to putting middle school where it is now, to adding girls to the boarding program, you know, all of those things, increasing the number of people that live on campus, you know, have all been pretty intentional, because we all feel they fit into who we want to be as a community. So I think the uniqueness of this place you won't find anywhere. You know, you've got religious and lay people living, you've got day and boarding, so the kids have wonderful experiences and can, as they get older, you know, whether they figure out who's living on campus and they start babysitting on campus with the kids. So there's this wonderful network of just positive feelings. And that whole idea of hospitality goes so far, so quickly. You know, people walk on this campus and they feel like they're welcomed, you know, and so, and the kids this year are singing louder than ever for whatever reasons, I don't know. Maybe because they feel they know the songs even more, but our songs of, you know, all are welcome and gather us in, and the lyrics to all that stuff are pretty powerful. And, you know, you don't know. It's really great to hear and to see. So.
And I think the next question, I think we've hit on a couple different points, but I just want to go ahead and ask it. Because in our role play, it was one of the key points we're trying to bring out. But I want to ask all of you, just chime in. There are other Catholic schools in the area, but only the Priory is based on the Benedictine tradition, as far as I'm aware. What is it, do you think, that makes the Priory different? And that experience different from those other schools?
One quick thing I'm thinking, you know, is I think we're intentionally small. You could go to St. Francis, you could go to St. Ignatius, you could go to Midi, big schools. We are intentionally small, and I think there are so many benefits to doing that. The last phrase of our mission statement, where everyone's known and loved, that's kind of really important here. So somebody here always has a connection with a young kid. I think that when people walk on the campus too, and you have a small educational community in a vast facility, which is cool.
I think a lot of things we mentioned before are also pretty unique to the Priory, and I think that sets us apart pretty much. Size, style.
So growing up during Holy Week, we would see a procession with someone literally on a cross that had been whipped and doing the Passion of Christ, reenacting that, going to Morada to go through the Stations of the Cross. So we would stand on our porch, we would watch this happen, and you would see all the brothers, you know, whipping themselves proceeding along on their knees, walking backwards, all of these things. And there's also a couple of churches where people go every year to do pilgrimage. And this is also known in Santa Fe. There's some very important pilgrimage churches there, and some other places in New Mexico. So I'm really was used to seeing this really graphic form of Catholicism and not being Catholic, and watching this sort of violence, if you will, and being pretty frightened by it. Also, the elementary school I went to was next to the parish Catholic church. So on Wednesday afternoons, there was 8 people in the bus. It was me and my 2 sisters and the 5 Jehovah's Witness kids. So we were very, very much on, everybody knew we weren't Catholic. And because all the kids were at catechism, that's where they were. And so on Thursday mornings, there was all the catechism stories and who did what. And we had no part of that. And I felt very excluded. And sort of, anytime I had to go to a funeral or rosary, I didn't know the Our Fathers, I didn't know the Hail Marys, I didn't know when to make the sign of the cross. It was always a really frightening experience. So when I came to the Priory for this first time, my sister happened to be working here. She invited me to teach a workshop. So I came out, and chapel used to be on Monday mornings, first thing. So I'm walking onto a high school campus. I'm 24 years old. I haven't been around teenagers in a really, not that long before that. But, we walk in, and she's ahead of me, and so she starts scooting in one of the pews right next to Brother Edward, and I just grabbed her by the back of the shirt, and I just kind of looked at her like, what are you doing, I don't know what to do, I had always felt like, I don't know what to do. Am I make the cross? Do I not make the cross? Is that the right thing to do? And so we sat there anyway, and the chapel happened to be about Rosh Hashanah. And the whole story was explained to us, and ever since then, I just felt like the way that this school works, and the way that it works so well, is by it being a center of education where we learn about all different religions. So it's you're included. There's none of this being excluded. You're not part of the community because you're a Catholic, or because you're not a Catholic. It's every time that we're going to have a mass for the first time, the theology teachers do a great job of saying, this is what happens when you take communion. No, you wouldn't take the host, but everyone's welcome to get a blessing. Everyone is included in that ceremony. Everyone is told what's going to happen, and that's how it makes it, because there is no ignorance around it. There's no fear around it because you know about it. It's also, it's not just, the chapels aren't just about Catholicism, even though we'll sing and we'll pray, but, just a couple weeks ago we celebrated Eid, and that's a Muslim holiday, and so we celebrate all holidays, and every holiday is treated equally, and every holiday is, the kids are well informed about it, and I think that brings people in. It makes them feel included. I really don't think that people feel like outsiders because they are so well informed when they are here.
I'm also kind of struck. Brian Schlack at open houses will sometimes just say to people to let them know that we are Catholic. We're proud of that tradition, but that there are as many Jewish students, really self-identifying Jewish students or agnostic students, really sometimes, as there are Catholic students. If anything, sometimes it's easier to tell all of the other faiths than it is kind of the students who identify as Catholic. But Brian makes an interesting point, and having taught theology here, he's right. People come from really different backgrounds, but for the most part, though, but they're curious, and they're hungry to talk about larger questions, bigger ideas. And if you don't have to call it God, you can call it other things. But the level of engagement is really interesting and sophisticated. And you can see that students are coming here with a really rich background. And it might not even be churched or overtly religious, but it's definitely smart. And they bring so much to it. And teaching world religions here is a phenomenal experience. Just what that experience was like was always just more to me than I ever expected. And I think that's part of this Benedictine humility is I've actually never heard from a student who said, I feel overtly turned away by by, you know, the Catholic Church here, or that I'm being proselytized, or that you're trying to make me something that I'm not. If that happens, I think it must happen accidentally, because I think we work really hard to make sure that kids feel like they're exactly fine who they are and where they are. But it's a really rich discussion with kids here from all backgrounds. So I've only seen it as positive.
Okay, well, we want to wrap up in the next 10 minutes here, so, but...
It's chapel today, so...
Yeah. But one quick question that we'd like to pass down the row here is, you know, what is a Benedictine education? What is a Benedictine education, and what does working here at the Priory mean to you? Quickly, and then if we have a couple minutes for questions, we can do that. But
I can say, you know, again, the Benedictine education part, again, going back to the beginning was the school as Benedict because it was, the monks were the first ones here, so certainly the influence of their learning and formation, bringing in certain ideas. I think the values that we actually have, and we name them Benedictine, really speak to the things we think we do really well here and the type of community we want. For me, you know, I've been here 23 years. My daughter was raised here. I lived on campus, all that stuff. So to me, it's been a wonderful midlife crisis, I guess. You know? And I couldn't think of working anywhere else. I think there are so many great parts of this campus and living here and being in a really rich educational community, spiritual community, all of that has so many benefits to me as a person.
There's a little book that all the kids are familiar with, Always We Begin Again. What that is, it's a Benedictine rule written for lay people, sort of making it, bring it up to date in a certain way, which I think is pretty good. But I've been told that there are some business kind of models built upon the rule of St. Benedict. What I'm trying to say is that St. Benedict was a person who had a good sense of people, and in his guidelines for living a monastic life, they made a lot of sense even in that day, and they make great sense even today to see how his charism, his thoughts, his basic philosophy fit into a diverse world that we have right now. And I think that's what, to me, Benedictine education is trying to take a 1,500-year-old rule of words from then and saying, how can that apply today? Are those values still good values? And I think that's, to me, what the Benedictine charism is, to bring that to life again.
A Benedictine education to me is watching what our students do once they graduate, how they go out into the world, how they continue this practice of these values that we hold so true. And in how I've seen that is in the times of struggle at our school, when we lose a teacher, passes away, or a student, and it's when they come back, the whole community comes back for these services, and the way that they come together, it doesn't matter how many years it's been since the student's been on campus. When they come back, we're all together again, and we're experiencing these struggles and these. There's other celebrations too. There's weddings, things like that the kids come back for. But it's knowing that they go out into the world, and then they come back, and what they bring back from outside and what they give to the outside from being a part of this community is incredible. And that's the times I felt that this place is truly Benedictine, is during these special times.
And I agree with all of those. I think what I've kind of learned about what makes the school Benedictine and what Benedictine education means is that there's an element of all of the ordinary things in life have a sacred, you know, undertone, and so you see it in the way that we talk to kids here. I think you would find that if you listen to the way that adults talk to kids here, it's so respectful, and there isn't kind of you know, a sense that these are people in the making. It's really these are who we work with. We work with young people, and they're brilliant as they are. But I mean, you know, these ordinary moments mean, like, we're really intentional about the way that students line up for lunch, the way that they clean up after themselves, the way that they save a spot for people at the lunch table. So the idea of the ordinary being sacred is I think, a Benedictine education, and it's always been the part that I think has been most shared here.
this past weekend we had our alumni weekend, and that was the largest one we've ever had. And I'd just like to mention the class of 1981, a great class, a wonderful class. I was very close to all those guys. I lived in the dormitory with a lot of them, and they somehow, this is before Facebook and all that other stuff, like the 30-year graduating class, there were 25 boys in that class. And I had, the first time I ever showed a slideshow to a class was their class at their senior retreat out on the beach somewhere. And it was one of those things where he said, you can come if you want us on a weekend, but I'd love to have you come. All 25 of the guys came. We were sleeping all over the place in this particular place. Showed the slideshow, and it made a great impact on them. At any rate, there were 25 boys in that class, and 21 of them showed up for the 30th reunion. The ones who didn't come, couldn't come. 2 came from Japan, 2 came from Mexico. 2 of the kids had been thrown out and came back as alone. And they came back because they wanted to continue the kind of community sense that they had then. So it goes on. By the way, parents are always part of the community, so we never get out of here.
We have about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to open it up and see if anyone had a question they wanted to ask that perhaps we didn't cover in the ones that we came up with.
I would like to Father Martin. I have never totally understood the concept of monk, monastic life, and how Benedictine differs from Jesuit Christian orders versus
How they differ?
how they differ.
Okay, how does Benedictine's community, the Benedictine community, how does it differ from, for example, the Jesuits, Franciscans, and all of the other different communities? With us, the concept of family is very important. So community, but interpreted as family. So my boss is the abbot, which means the father. So he tells me whatever he says, that's what I do. And so it's built on like a father and a family type thing. So it's a family type orientation. So for example, the reason why we stay in the same place, because families don't move. People move out of families, of course, at different times, but a family stays. This is where this family is. So Benedict, they won't transfer me, for example, to some place in Missouri, thank God, or Nebraska, thank God. So we stay in the same place. So the disadvantage of that is you're stuck here. But you know what? I don't mind being stuck here. That's number one. The other thing is when kids do come back as alums, we're still here. We've been on this block for 50 some odd years, and we'll always be here as long as there are Benedictines here. And so there's that kind of sense of permanence that we have, which I think grounds us in a different way from someone who can be asked to go from, for example, USF to Santa Clara to have a different job. So that's one of the key things, I think, the family concept. We're here, we work as a family.
Thank you. Just go right down the road.
Okay, this might be a little too big for the time remaining, but can you just toss out some ideas as history changes the presence here? What kind of task and what sort of implementation do you see happening for?
If there are
Prior.
no, yeah. See, one of the things is we're not in charge of it. The monk, the abbot, and that community is. So, the concept of if these monks were gone, would another abbey be interested in this school? And that would all happen on an abbey level, but the abbots are not with us. So, in one sense, we're not in control of who might be here religious-wise. Our concept would be that, St. Anselm, we have a board of directors, which is 2 monks here and 3 monks at St. A's. That model would continue. So those monks, that school owns this place and has since 1975. So once there were no monks here, they might still come out, and maybe their individuals would come out more often to kind of keep that Benedictine identity. They might come out for in-services, retreats, come out more for more board meetings. They may not be around as much for the kids, but that abbey owns this place, so it would be their decision on how much they would want to be a continued part of this. They probably also want to make sure, in the hiring, they hire me. The Board of Trustees doesn't. So they help in the process, but the Benedictines have the final say and approval of who would come. So they might want somebody that maybe has had a background in a Benedictine school, whether it's me or some of the other administrators, to make sure that that would stay.
Okay, so if I could rephrase the question, if the people that own us from St. Elm were to come and ask you, I haven't been present, so I would like your recommendations on how best this community can continue this Benedictine richness, what would you recommend?
Well, I think we're doing a lot of things right now to maintain this Benedictine enrichment. Probably the one thing we're thinking about right now is to send small groups of teachers back to St. Anselm on a 2 or 3 day retreat thing. Let them see what a larger monastic community is like. Learn a little bit more about the history, almost a little semi-formation program. And then they would come out. And so actually that is one of the proposals that Nancy Newman is working on right now. So that would be something that we'd hope, because if there was certainly no presence, we'd want to make sure that people saw who the monks were. Yeah.
I'd also make the point, we have an incredible Board of Trustees. They get it. And what we try to do is at the Board of Trustees meetings, we always have, or we usually have, some sort of a presentation that kind of fills them in on some of the gaps, you know, as far as Benedictinism is concerned and things like that. But the Board of Trustees are people who are just incredibly attached and involved with the school, give us incredible leadership, but are also very aware of who we are, and that makes all of that's wonderful. And so they're very helpful.
We'll try to do one more. You got a question?
So clearly all four of you embrace this philosophy of student considered respect and all kinds of stuff. How do you train or ensure that the entire staff of the faculty understands all this and practices it every day in their classrooms and throughout the field and whatever? Do you train? Do you have retreats that talk about this? How do you know that they buy into this on a daily basis?
Well, it happens in a couple of ways. We do retreats together, and there's always a Benedictine retreat that the entire staff and faculty do. That happens every year. New teachers are kind of under the charge of Ruth Benz, who's really in charge of making sure that they understand what it means to be here and what's different about it. And then a lot of it just kind of happens, I think, just by simply just swimming in it. And just being here, day in, day out. The amazing thing, actually, is that you see faculty that are more than willing to talk to each other about. I think you haven't been at chapel. You should be there. When we were at retreat, I saw you reading your book instead of listening. It doesn't work. So you have a lot of it that I think the adults kind of take that on themselves to make sure that we understand. And it's done in a really non-threatening, respectful way. So it's somewhat overt in the retreats and then the training for new teachers, but then the rest of it happens by every week we do the exact same things that the kids do. We eat lunch with them, we eat breakfast with them, we eat dinner with many of them. We go to chapel with them once a week. We travel with them, we go overseas, and we just spend tons of time with them. I think that's kind of ends up happening.
And the faculty meetings too, either Brother Ed or I usually will address some aspect of Benedictine life so that people understand. So we meet every 3 weeks or so for a faculty meeting.
And there's, in the employee handbook, there's a role of the faculty, which is about 5 pages long, that outlines a number of things that, as a faculty member here, things you need to do and understand. So.
Unfortunately, we have a hard stop. These guys have an appointment with our kids, so they all must run and head off to chapel. So first, I'd like to thank our panelists.